President Obama used his Conference on Violent Extremism this week to respond to the media over his choice of language in describing terrorism.
There's been a fair amount of debate in the press and among pundits about the words we use to describe and frame this challenge. We are not at war with Islam. We are at war with people who have perverted Islam.
Well, Steve Hayes, the president there, specifically addressing the pundits. I mean, unlike Eric Holder says it's just a Fox thing, the president, you may disagree with his reasoning, felt the need to explain himself on this linguistic issue.
Well, I think he should explain himself. I mean, go back to his statement on national television, the primetime address September 10th, where he said ISIL is not Islamic. There's nothing Islamic about ISIL. I think a lot of people disagree with that, certainly foremost among those, the people fighting on behalf of ISIL. I think it's worth having a debate about the extent to which Islam is playing a role in what's happening, and I think reporters have an obligation to cover it that way.
Right. So is the press sort of forced or prompted the president to not just use the terms used, but to explain? I mean, he devoted a good part of that speech to explaining why he does not want to use the term Islamic terrorism.
Right, and he needs to explain it. I think he needs to do a better job of explaining it. And I was going to say before the break that if you look at the polls right now, the American people, in other words, absent any ideological take by the media, the American people say they want the president to do more to fight ISIL, and they want him to talk about whether or not this is an Islamic threat. So that's coming from a genuine place, Howie. And I would say, yes, the president has to exercise some restraint, because we do not want, as Americans, to say we're at war with Islam and with every country that has a Muslim majority. That's not in our best interest.
Right. Now, it's interesting that Bill O'Reilly on Fox says we're now in a holy war. Ed Schultz on MSNBC says we're now in a religious war, I mean, people who are not on the same side of the spectrum. So I want to hold up this New York Post cover the day after the president's speech that we showed, if we could put it up here. Blindfolded Obama says Islamic terror, I just don't see it. Even with this sort of artistic liberty, does that strike you as a fair cover?
I think it is a fair question to ask by a publication like that asks those sorts of questions. But I think Juan is right.
He doesn't see Islamic terrorism, or that he doesn't choose to frame it that way?
He doesn't see it as Islamic terrorism because he doesn't see the terrorists as being of the Islamic faith. And, not even the president has the power to make something be a terrorist act or not by the term that he uses. That's not what's important. The two issues I see are, number one, is he affecting a strategy based on whatever it is that leads him to avoid use of this I word that he doesn't want to use? And secondly, as a leader, I think you have to be very careful about sending a message to people who work with you, your advisors, that there are certain things you won't touch and don't want to hear. You might not hear the truth from them, or they might not be encouraged to tell you what's really going on.
The other question is, is he quick to invoke Islam when when Muslims are victims, as he did in the
Chapel Hill shootings,
right. And quick to eliminate any discussion of Islam when Muslims.
By the way, it's not just Muslims, because
acts.
When you had the 21 Coptic Christians killed, the Egyptians, initial White House statement didn't talk about Christians, and there was the random killings in the Paris kosher deli, which the White House later walked that back. So,
well, let me also go to, this is not involving President Obama and the current controversy, but years ago when there were Christians bombing abortion clinics, I don't think there was hesitation on the part of the news media and others to say that it was Christians who were doing so, they believe, in regards to their faith or what they believe faithfully.
You see that as a double standard. Okay, I got to go.